Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. It's great that you reached out about the Christmas story, the one with the shepherds and the wise men and the star and the manger. You even did some research and sent us some stuff in Portuguese about it. That's pretty cool. I'm really curious to unpack all this and get to the real story behind Jesus' birth.
Well, it's certainly a story that continues to fascinate people after all these centuries.
Yeah, for sure. So let's jump right in. What can you tell us about this research you got? It mentioned something about the possible year and month of Jesus' birth, right?
Yeah, it does. And it might surprise you to learn that Jesus might not have been born in December like we traditionally celebrate.
Wait, really? I always thought December 25th was his actual birthday.
Well, that date is more of a tradition that developed later on, probably around the 4th century AD.
So like hundreds of years after Jesus was actually born.
Exactly. It's thought that early Christians might have chosen December 25th to coincide with existing Roman celebrations like the Feast of Sol Invictus, a sun god.
Interesting. So they kind of merged a pagan holiday with the birth of Jesus.
That's a common theory.
So if December is out, when do we think Jesus was actually born?
There are some clues in the Gospel of Luke. It mentions shepherds being out in the fields watching their flocks at night.
Right. I remember that part.
Well, shepherds in Judea wouldn't be out in the fields in December. It would have been way too cold, especially in the hills. It's much more likely that Jesus was born during a milder time of year like spring or even fall.
Okay, that makes sense. So no snowy Christmas then?
Probably not. But there might have been a harvest festival atmosphere.
Oh yeah, I like that. Now what about the Star of Bethlehem? Was that a real astronomical event?
It's possible. Some astronomers believe it could have been a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, which happened in 7 BC.
Hold on, 7 BC. But doesn't that create a problem? I mean, if Jesus is supposed to be the starting point for BC and AD, how could he have been born before Christ?
It's a good question, and it turns out there was a miscalculation when the BCA system was created centuries later. The monk who devised it, Dionysius Exiguus, was off by a few years, probably about 4 to 6.
Wow, so everything we thought we knew about the timeline could be off by several years.
That's right. So instead of being born in the year 1 AD, Jesus was likely born sometime between 6 and 4 BC.
That is pretty mind-blowing. It makes you wonder what else we might have gotten wrong about history.
It certainly highlights the challenges of historical research and how our understanding of the past can evolve as we uncover new evidence.
Okay, so we've debunked the December birthday. But I'm still curious, does that Portuguese research you mentioned give us any more specific clues about when Jesus might have been born?
It does, and it gets pretty fascinating. It suggests a link between Jesus' birth and the Jewish calendar, specifically the service of Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist.
Okay, remind me how Zechariah fits into all of this.
Well, Zechariah was a priest, and according to the Gospel of Luke, an angel appeared to him and told him that he and his wife Elizabeth would have a son who would be John the Baptist.
Right, and John the Baptist was like the forerunner to Jesus, preparing the way for him.
Exactly. Now here's where it gets interesting. Zechariah belonged to a priestly order called Aabia, and this order had a specific rotation for their service in the temple in Jerusalem.
So they kept records of who was serving when.
Yes, they did. And those records can help us pinpoint the timing of Zechariah's service.
Okay, I'm starting to see where this is going.
So if we assume that Elizabeth conceived John the Baptist shortly after Zechariah's service, and we know that John was born about 6 months before Jesus, we can start to narrow down the time frame.
So it's like a historical domino effect.
Precisely. And it leads us to, well, it points to September or October for Jesus' birth.
No kidding. So maybe no snow, but maybe a harvest festival atmosphere. That paints a totally different picture.
It does. And what's even more intriguing is that September or October coincides with the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles, a major harvest festival.
You're kidding. So there's a potential symbolic connection there.
It's certainly a possibility. We'll dive into that more in the next part of our deep dive.
I can't wait. This is blowing my mind. We've gone from a December birthday to a possible link with the Feast of Tabernacles in just a few minutes.
And we're just getting started. We still have a lot more to unpack.
Before we move on, though, can you tell us a bit more about the Feast of Tabernacles? What was it all about, and why is it potentially significant here?
Well, the Feast of Tabernacles was a major festival in the Jewish calendar. It commemorated the Israelites' journey through the wilderness after they left Egypt.
Right, when they wandered for 40 years.
Yes. During the festival, they would build temporary shelters called tabernacles as a reminder of their reliance on God's protection during those 40 years.
So it was a time of remembering their history and their faith.
Exactly. And it was also a time of joyous celebration, feasting, and giving thanks for the harvest.
I see. So a festival of gratitude and remembrance. And now we're saying it might be connected to the birth of Jesus. Wow, it's like we're building this whole new understanding of the story.
That's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're peeling back the layers and uncovering a much richer and more nuanced picture.
Okay, so we've debunked the December birth, explored the possible connection to the Jewish calendar, and even hinted at the symbolism of the Feast of Tabernacles.
Yep.
Now, I'm really curious to hear about that journey to Bethlehem, the one, no room at the inn and all that. What's the real story behind that?
Well, it was quite a journey, over 90 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem, and they probably traveled on foot.
90 miles.
Yeah.
That's a long way, especially for Mary being pregnant.
Yeah.
What was that journey actually like?
It would have been pretty arduous. There were two main routes they could have taken. The shorter one went through Samaria, but that was riskier. The longer, safer route went through the Jordan Valley.
So like choosing between a dangerous shortcut and a long detour, neither one sounds fun.
Exactly. And regardless of which route they took, it wouldn't have been easy. They would have faced rough terrain, unpredictable weather, and the possibility of encountering bandits or wild animals. And all this while Mary was heavily pregnant.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? It definitely wasn't a comfortable trip.
Not at all.
So how long would a journey like that have taken?
Realistically, probably about 7 to 10 days, depending on the conditions.
7 to 10 days. Wow. Suddenly the no room at the inn part of the story makes a lot more sense.
It does, doesn't it? Travel in those days was a completely different experience, especially for someone like Mary.
That's a powerful image to keep in mind. But why did they have to travel to Bethlehem in the first place? Was there a specific reason?
There was a very specific reason. This journey actually fulfilled a prophecy from the book of Micah, which predicted that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem.
So even though it was a tough journey, it was all part of a bigger plan.
It seems that way. It speaks to the themes of humility and faith that are at the heart of the Christmas story.
This is incredible. We'll dig into those themes more in the next part of our deep dive. It's amazing how these seemingly small details have so much depth to them.
That's the beauty of history. There's always more to uncover.
I can't wait to hear more. Stay tuned, everyone, for part 2, where we'll continue to explore the real story of Jesus' birth. Welcome back to our deep dive into the real story of Jesus' birth. We left off talking about that incredible journey to Bethlehem. But now I want to shift gears a bit and explore something else. What was Judea like back then? I mean, the world Jesus was born into.
It's a great question because the cultural and religious landscape of that time really shapes the whole story. Think about it. Judea in the 1st century BC was a melting pot of religious and political tensions. You have the Jewish people deeply rooted in tradition with religious practices woven into their everyday lives. They're waiting for the coming of the Messiah, the promised one who would liberate them. And at the same time, they're living under Roman occupation, which obviously creates all sorts of conflict.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And you mentioned the Messiah. Were there different ideas about who the Messiah would be and what he would do?
Absolutely. Within Judaism, there were different groups or sects, each with their own interpretations of the scriptures and their own expectations for the Messiah.
Like different denominations almost?
Yeah, kind of. You had the Pharisees, who were known for their strict adherence to the law, and the Sadducees, who were more politically influential and kind of skeptical about some of the more mystical beliefs like the resurrection. And then there were the Essenes. They were an ascetic group who had withdrawn from society, and, well, they might have had connections to the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Okay, so you have these different groups within Judaism, each with their own beliefs and practices. It sounds like it was a pretty complex religious landscape.
It definitely was. And then on top of that, you have the Roman Empire ruling over Judea. The Romans have their own gods and their own ways of doing things.
So how did that impact daily life for the Jewish people? Living under Roman rule,
Well, for most people, daily life probably revolved around family and community and religious observance. The majority of people lived in rural areas working as farmers or shepherds or artisans. They followed the Jewish calendar with its festivals and holy days, and they would have been deeply familiar with the stories and teachings of the Hebrew Bible, but they were also living under a foreign power. They had to pay taxes to Rome, they had Roman soldiers stationed in their land, and there was always this underlying tension.
It makes you think about how history repeats itself. People have always had to deal with conflict and oppression and the struggle for freedom.
It's true. And despite all the historical differences, there are some human experiences that are universal. The importance of family, the search for meaning, the longing for a better future. These are themes that resonate with us just as they did back then.
And they're themes that are at the heart of the Christmas story, too.
Right.
You have this idea of hope and renewal and the possibility of something transformative entering the world, even in the midst of all this darkness and difficulty.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that the story doesn't start with Jesus being born in a palace surrounded by wealth and power. He's born in humble circumstances to ordinary parents who are facing real-world struggles.
That's right. They had to travel 90 miles just to register for a census. And when they got to Bethlehem, there was no room for them at the inn.
It's a reminder that greatness can emerge from the most unexpected places. That even in the midst of hardship and uncertainty, there's still potential for something beautiful and meaningful to happen.
Okay, so we've talked about the political backdrop of the religious landscape, the social dynamics. Is there anything else that's essential to understanding the world Jesus was born into?
One more thing, I think the temple in Jerusalem, you can't really understand that period without understanding the significance of the temple.
Remind me what made the temple so important.
Well, for the Jewish people, the temple was the center of their religious life. It was a place of pilgrimage, a place where they offered sacrifices, a place where they gathered as a community, and it was also a powerful symbol of their identity and their resistance to Roman rule.
So it was both a spiritual and a political hub.
Exactly. Understanding the importance of the temple helps us understand the context for many events in Jesus' life, including his birth.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. It's like we're piecing together a giant puzzle. The historical timeline, the cultural setting, the religious beliefs, the political tensions, it's all interconnected.
That's the beauty of history. It's not just isolated events, it's an interconnected tapestry of human experience. And by digging deeper into the Christmas story, we can start to see how even the smallest details can reveal profound truths.
So we're not just debunking the traditional Christmas narrative, we're actually uncovering a much richer and more nuanced picture.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We've explored the historical context, but now I want to delve into the deeper meaning of the story and why it continues to have such a powerful impact on people, even after all these centuries.
To our deep dive. We've uncovered a lot of historical truths about the events surrounding Jesus' birth. But now I want to talk about the significance. Why does this story resonate with so many people, even after all these centuries?
That's a great question. What gives this story such enduring power? Why does it still captivate billions of people across cultures and time periods?
I think it's about more than just the historical facts. It's about something deeper, something that speaks to the human experience.
You're right. I think the story of Jesus' birth taps into those universal human longings. You know, the longings for hope and renewal and the possibility of something truly transformative entering the world.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, even when things seem hopeless, there's still potential for light and change.
Exactly. And think about it. This transformative figure, this Messiah, he's not born into wealth and power. He's born in humble circumstances, to ordinary parents facing real-world struggles.
It makes the story so much more relatable, doesn't it?
I think so. It suggests that greatness can emerge from the most unexpected places. That anyone, no matter their background, can make a difference in the world.
And the journey to Bethlehem,
Yeah.
with all its hardships,
Yeah.
could that be a metaphor for our own journeys through life? You know, the challenges and obstacles we all face?
It's an interesting thought. We all go through difficult times, times of uncertainty and struggle. But the story of Jesus' birth reminds us that even in those difficult times, there's a guiding purpose. A destination worth striving for.
So it's not just about the destination, but the journey itself.
Exactly. The resilience, the faith, the perseverance it takes to get there. And remember, this journey leads to the birth of Jesus, a figure who embodies love, compassion, and forgiveness.
It suggests that even our most difficult experiences can lead to something beautiful and transformative.
Absolutely.
I have to say, hearing all this makes me view the Christmas story in a whole new light. It's not just a feel-good holiday tale. It's a story about the human condition. The potential for hope and change, even in the midst of hardship.
And that's what makes it such an enduring narrative, I think. It speaks to something deep within us, something that transcends cultural boundaries and historical eras.
This deep dive has been eye-opening. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of all the historical and symbolic layers within this story.
And that's really the point, to spark curiosity, to challenge assumptions, to encourage you to keep exploring and questioning.
So to our listener who requested this deep dive, Thank you for sending us on this journey. I hope we've given you a deeper appreciation for the real story of Jesus' birth.
And to all our listeners, keep questioning, keep digging. Never lose that thirst for knowledge.
Well said. And until next time, keep diving deep.